Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Renate McNay and with me in the studio today is David Bingham. Hello,
Hello.
David. And we are going to talk about non-dual pointing. So, David, I want to ask you first a question before you go into that.
Okay.
In the interview you had before with Ian, my husband, you mentioned 2 times that at this present time the human race has the possibility to awaken. And I thought that is a very interesting statement, and I would like to know how you came to this conclusion,
Okay.
or what is pointing into this direction. So tell us what your thoughts are about that.
Okay. The world as we experience it can be perceived on many different levels. So it can be perceived as being absolute reality, or it can be perceived in a way where it's known to be a phenomena or a manifestation. And what points to the development of consciousness is the sequence of unfolding throughout life. So it appears to me that from the opportunity of a very few people to be able to realize self-awareness, that's coming into focus for many, many more people now. And the way consciousness is revealing that is with greater and greater simplicity. Because as there is in reality only present awareness and existence, the way consciousness plays the game is to actually disguise that. So everything about the manifestation is to conceal the fact that all there is present awareness. So the concept of time, the thinking process, the body, they're all devices that consciousness uses to hide itself. And
So, excuse me.
sorry.
Just want to ask you, why is it doing that?
Because it can. Because the nature of consciousness or awareness is that it is infinite. It's a field of infinite possibilities. And if you look at it in terms of cycles, that there can be cycles where there can be ups and there can be downs, and there can be concealment, complete ignorance, and there can also be complete knowing, and it can move from one to the other, and it loves doing that. So that's why it does it, just because it can, really. And it's a really interesting level at the moment, because self-realization is something that is becoming universally available, and it's at a time when the invitation is there for many, many people, because a lot of the fabric of life, the apparent security that people have adopted in relative terms, so things like, the country they live in, their work, their relationships, the family, the fabric of society, financial structures, social structures, are all being shaken at the moment.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's actually offering an invitation, because people are saying, well, hang on, I thought I was safe here, and I'm not.
Yes.
So that's giving rise to a question.
Yes.
But actually, it's consciousness that's giving rise to that, because that's the invitation to see what is real and what is present. So it plays the game of pretending that it really is this person called Renata for a period of time, and then it reveals itself as itself. So if you take it from the point of view of a young child, for the first couple of years of life, there is just this field of awareness in which everything is being registered, but there isn't a sense of individual self there. So there is an appearance of a body-mind of a 1 or 2 year old girl,
Yes.
and everything's being experienced, and everything's experienced in a state of total wonder.
Yes.
But consciousness plays the game of hide and seek. It pretends that it really is this person round about the age of 2, and through reinforcement of being called by your name and the whole of the kind of family structure being reinforced, you come to totally believe that that's who you are.
Yes, that's the sad thing. I mean, I'm observing that with my granddaughter in the moment.
Yes.
How she slowly moves out of the space of complete awareness.
Yes.
And gets identified with this little,
With the form.
I am Lorraine. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then through life, through the early years and through the teen years, there's a building of the sense of self in terms of what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like, what you don't like, and the preoccupation with that whole story.
Yes.
And that progresses, and you could say that in recent history, the way it's been experienced it has been that the cycle hasn't been completed, that from the level of knowing up until the age of 2, through the concealment in the early years, the concealment has actually continued because people remain bound by the forms. So the identification continues usually until death. But actually the new opportunity that's available is for that cycle to be completed, because from that initial level of knowing, through the identification with the form and through the body and the personality, there's now the opportunity that consciousness is actually revealing itself to itself.
So does that mean, David, that this whole game we are playing, or consciousness is playing with itself, is coming to an end?
What?
I mean, sorry,
Yes.
on the surface, if we look at the world, that seems to happen, that we are somehow sliding down somewhere
Yes.
into distinction.
Yes.
And what you say on another level, the same is happening.
Yeah, that in terms of the story, or in terms of what's happening in the world, it appears as though everything's become very shaky.
Yes.
But consciousness is actually using that's intentional, because it's revealing itself to itself. And so the clarification is taking place where previously it was concealing the fact that present awareness, which is the only thing that is real, is something that isn't personally owned. And present awareness is always with us. So in this moment, if we take what there is present awareness. There's a knowing of everything that is arising in this moment.
Right.
So that present awareness knows this body sitting on this seat. It knows the sound of the gentle buzzing, the light. And that is being registered directly in present awareness.
Yes.
But actually the way consciousness disguises itself is it pretends that there is a person there experiencing that. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the nature of awareness, it's something that is just here. And it knows everything. It knows everything on a sensory level. It knows the sense of there being an individual here.
So let's do that now. So I feel myself sitting here now.
Mm.
I perceive myself as somebody sitting here looking at you.
Mm.
So what is the non-dual pointing? How would you tell me that I'm not really sitting here?
Okay. With non-dual pointing, it actually clarifies the distinction between what is permanent and what is temporary. Mm-hmm. So what never changes is the awareness that knows that.
Yes.
So that awareness is registering the sitting there directly, so it knows that that body is sitting there. Okay. Now the mind may come in as a secondary device where it would say, I'm sitting here and this isn't a very comfortable seat, or it makes some other kind of judgment about it. But actually the knowing of the sitting there is something that is just known in awareness, and it's known directly, and the individual isn't required to know that.
So because we learn that we are an I, so we say, I am sitting here, and I'm feeling hot, I'm feeling cold. But those are actually what you say, feelings which arise within awareness.
Yeah.
It's direct knowledge,
Yes.
as you call it.
That everything about the manifestation is reinforcing the manifestation.
Yes.
So if you turn on the TV, or if you read the newspaper, or if you
Yes.
speak to most people,
Yeah.
it's always from the point of view of the separate individual.
I am receiving
Yeah.
through my senses something, right?
But if it's noticed just very clearly that what is primary is the awareness in which that is known.
Yes.
For instance, the common thing would be to say, I think. But actually, if it's looked at carefully, it's noticed that there's an awareness of thinking. So the thinking isn't who you are, there's something that is aware of that. And in the same way as people would say, well, I can taste that water.
Yeah.
The taste of the water is registered in awareness, and there isn't actually an individual involved in doing that. And also, if you take the various states of consciousness, the waking state, the dreaming state, and the deep sleep state, awareness is actually continuous through them. Continuous isn't actually the right word, because there is no continuity, because it's just this.
Yeah.
But in the waking state, there is awareness of the waking state environment. So there's an awareness of the waking state body, the waking state thinking process, the waking state emotions and preoccupations, the waking state world. In the dream state, there is an awareness of the dream environment, of the dream individual, of the dream emotions and the dream thoughts. And in the deep sleep state, awareness is simply aware of itself. It actually returns to the level of non-manifestation, to the level of just knowing itself, which is home, which is why human beings crave sleep so much, because they need some relief from all the turbulence that is experienced in the waking and dream state.
I actually had a couple of times the experience that I was awake and my
Awake
body
to
was,
deep sleep.
yes.
And that's a great
And
validation of the fact that it's awareness that knows that. So awareness can also know deep sleep, but it's an awareness of that.
Yes.
And that demonstrates that awareness, the changing states, the waking, the dream state and the deep sleep state are actually superimposed upon present awareness, that actually there is no time. And if you take, for instance, the dream state as an example, you know, there may be a dream that covers a lifetime. It might be that, you know, you're dreaming over, you know, that things are happening over a 50-year period or something. But actually you wake up and you realise that that didn't happen, that only had any sense of reality while there was identification with a dream state of consciousness. And actually that is true of the waking state. The waking state is also actually just an extremely convincing play that consciousness is doing, and it's totally convincing and totally mesmerizing, because consciousness is providing everything. It's providing the knowing of it, it's providing the characters, it's providing the thought structures, it's providing the emotions, and it's providing all the scenery. It provides the whole production that it comes up with. So it's totally convincing. So while consciousness is choosing to not know itself, there's no possibility of knowing that. But when it decides to reveal itself, there's also no possibility of not knowing that. And that's what's available now, because consciousness is revealing itself to itself, you know, on a very large scale within the story of the waking state of consciousness. And what non-dual pointing does is it makes the distinction between that which is permanent, that which is present, that which never changes, and that which constantly changes. So, for instance, the seeking process, so whether you're seeking, a new car or a new job or a new partner,
Yes.
or whether it's spiritual seeking,
Yeah.
that process is something that appears to be happening in time, and it appears to be a process.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that can develop. So there is actually the process of spiritual development.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, experiencing more peace, experiencing more stillness is something that can happen within the phenomena of the focal point of awareness called Renata or David or anyone else.
Yes, that's
But
right.
that actually isn't moving towards self-realization, because self-realization is already the case, because it's the simple awareness that knows everything. So the distinction between experience and awareness is that experience is something that arises within awareness, but it's awareness that knows that experience.
Right. Okay.
So if you take a subtle spiritual experience, for instance, say the experience of stillness,
Yes.
that is an experience. Now, present awareness knows that, and it knows it fully. But the way it disguises itself is it pretends that there's this thing called stillness, there's this thing called presence, that by practicing that, by putting attention on it, it can grow.
Mm-hmm.
And the growth of that experience will result in self-realization.
It's interesting when you say the word, the intention of consciousness is doing that.
Mm.
It gives me the feeling, first of all, that there's time,
Mm.
and I somehow cannot combine intention and consciousness. It's
Right.
like there is a thinking process. I want to get somewhere with that.
Yes.
So it's somehow intention doesn't fit
Okay.
for me
Okay.
in my concept to awareness.
Okay.
Okay. Can you explain that how it
Okay.
works? Yeah.
Well, non-conceptual awareness is one way of describing it. Being is another. Presence is another. They're the basis on which everything is experienced. So the paradox is that consciousness is simultaneously totally static, totally stationary and stable, but also infinitely dynamic.
Okay.
And those things are simultaneous.
Mm-hmm.
So it appears as though there is an intention,
Yes.
but actually there has to be the arising of the appearance for that aspect to reveal itself.
Right.
Because actually all there is present awareness.
Yes. So it's the dynamic
It's the
behind it which gives the appearance, or the dynamic movement gives the appearance that there is an intention behind it.
Yes.
Is that
It makes it, because there is only present awareness which isn't manifest,
right?
which doesn't do anything, it just knows everything, including itself,
Yes.
then the way manifestation occurs is to actually demonstrate usually the opposite nature of what present awareness is.
Mm-hmm.
So the present aspect of awareness actually uses time
Yes.
to make it seem as though something's happening. And
right.
and the awareness, non-conceptual awareness, actually creates conceptual awareness, or the mind or the thinking process, to disguise itself.
Mm-hmm.
So there can be a total preoccupation with the thinking process and the whole story. So everything begins to get whipped up. So if you take it the way it works, as a human being wakes up in the morning, for the first moment there's just stillness, and then there's a re-engagement of the mind, and the mind kicks in and it starts saying, what have I got to do today? How old am I? What are my problems? You know, how am I going to stop all these things going wrong? And a complete identification with the story. You pull your boots on and off you go again. But actually, all of that is the game that consciousness is playing, the game of disguise, where it's disguising itself, pretending that it really is this person, totally hiding the fact that it is actually this still space that doesn't move anywhere or go anywhere. And even in the most turbulent state of mind, there is a knowing of that it is present awareness that knows that. So present awareness can fully know the deepest spiritual experience. So it can fully experience stillness, expansion beyond the boundaries of the body, bliss consciousness. It can know all of those subtle experiences, but it also knows what it is to experience total turbulence or total exhaustion. But it's awareness that fully knows that.
Yes. Yeah, but yeah, and at the same time, most of the human race, I think probably 99%, live in complete ignorance. And you still think that a shift can happen and people start waking up.
Yeah. Well, the idea of a shift is actually something within the story of life, that there's something wonderful that can happen, that this shift can take place to special people under special circumstances who've undergone, you know, many years of special practices, and it's all very special. But actually the nature of it is self-realization. It's realization because it's realization of what is already the case, that there is no awakening. There is realization because, as you say, there can be total ignorance where consciousness is completely hiding itself from itself, and then it reveals itself to itself.
So I heard once the theory that if enough people wake up, that could shift the vibration on this planet.
Yes.
And gives the opportunity for
Yes.
more people to wake up. Do you believe that this is happening?
I do, actually. I think that's obviously happening within the story of life.
Of course, yes.
And the thing with self-realization is that that begins to happen from the platform of total stability. Because when it's seen very clearly that the awareness that you are has never gone anywhere, it's that which has known everything.
Yeah.
So that stable, totally stationary awareness can know that drama, and it can know that unfoldment, and it loves those stories and it loves those dramas. So actually, because present awareness can't develop, it can't move from where it is, because it's that which knows everything, what it loves is the idea of dynamic activity and progress and evolution. So within the phenomena of relative life, those things are appearing. So you could say in life on Earth at the moment that there's a development of consciousness, that there's the possibility to actually see that we reside in present awareness which is totally stable and isn't actually taking part within the drama. The amazing thing about that is that it puts the whole thing in context, and it's a bit like being at the cinema where you're watching a film, you're totally identified with it, the action's taking place and it seems completely real, and then somebody comes along and kicks the back of your seat or starts eating popcorn or something. You remember actually that it's just a film. And that's what consciousness does, that it actually reveals itself as being the basis on which this whole thing is experienced. And then the enjoyment of that, it just moves on to a completely different level, because that drama is seen as a drama. All the stuff that before, because identification made it seem as though, yes, I'm really here, I'm on Earth, what's going to happen? The whole financial structures are collapsing, we're running out of this, there are these tensions between all these people, there isn't enough food, everyone's suffering, you know, and there's no solution to it, we're all heading for this big black hole.
Yes.
actually consciousness creates that because it's in contrast to the nature of things as they really are, which is that there is just present awareness. In terms of the story of human life, you could say that we're on a kind of down cycle at the moment because conscious loves completely knowing itself and also completely ignoring its true nature. So the way it's playing out at the moment is it's ignoring its true nature, that it's hiding that. So there's complete identification. So this is only on the human level, because actually on the animal level, on the level of plant life, that is still totally at ease. But on the human level, the mind has predominated for a period of time. It seems as though the mind is required to resolve all of these things, but actually that's still the game of hide and seek that consciousness is playing. There is no solution for man to find, because it's consciousness that's revealing it all. Man isn't actually doing anything. The whole script is being written, and the characters are playing their parts, and there isn't anything that can be done outside that.
When I started my spiritual path about 20 years ago, I had this vision that what's going on in our universe or on our planet is nothing but a computer game of somebody outside in a more developed reality, level of reality. We don't have a free will. They just push a button and we are moving and there are these few who can get enlightened, and there's suffering and all that, and
that's a great description.
Somebody is playing with us.
Well, if you use the example of the film The Matrix, which was a computer-generated, the Earth was a computer-generated reality, and that the whole of that programming was to reinforce the integrity of the Matrix. The world we live in is actually a consciousness-generated reality. That consciousness is behind the whole thing, but consciousness is actually benign. That it appears as though there are all these terrible things happening, but it's experiencing that so that it can know itself by contrast. Because if you look at it from the point of view of a small child, there's no context to the experience, because up to the age of 2, there's a complete knowing of everything. So there's awareness. So, the mum comes in and gives them this, and then they see something else, and they're like little drunken old men. They're sort of falling around in total ecstasy. Or they're crying for a moment, and then that instantly stops. But the whole thing is experienced without a centre. And then...
That's very interesting what you say. That's right. Yes.
So there's absolutely no centre to it. But the reason that we undergo all the suffering is because there has to be the opportunity to see that in context. Because when there's the sense of another, then there can be the sense of separation. So the idea that someone else is suffering in this location can give rise to compassion. It can give rise to, other feelings that give a depth to the experience, but also a depth to the knowing of awareness. Because when there is simple awareness that's knowing it, there's no context to that. But with suffering and with separation, and if you look at the way manifestation appears, it's actually the kind of polar opposite to the nature of present awareness, because present awareness it's permanent, it's still, it's immovable, you can't move to it, you can't move away from it. It always knows itself. So if you take those and then you look at what is the opposite of that, what appears is separation, pain, ignorance, not knowing itself, the idea that it can move away from itself, the idea that there's time, that you can move miles and miles away from where you are, and that you have to go and find something, that there's something to be found when actually you're already home. And actually when it's pointed out, it's just seen really clearly that the appearance of things is actually just in total contrast to the true nature of things. And the reason it does that is to give the knowing of itself a context. Because without that, there is just the knowing, but that knowing is without a comparison.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking about when you said, I think in our little chat last night, you talked about the personal God and the impersonal God.
Mm.
Do you want to explain that again for our viewers?
Okay, I'll have a go.
What those two sides are?
Okay. Well, you know, some people believe in God. They say, oh, there is God, I believe in God, and, you know, there are all these miracles to show that. But actually, the impersonal aspect of God is the awareness in which everything arises.
Yes.
So you could say that it's consciousness. You know, people, you know, modern scientists say, well, you know, there is energy and you can't destroy energy. But actually the substratum of that is consciousness. But because it is the awareness that knows everything, so awareness or consciousness is conscious of energy, you can't do a little experiment in a laboratory to find it, because it's that which is looking, it's that which is seeing what's taking place.
That's right, yeah.
So the impersonal aspect, and using God, which, you know, is one term that can be used, is the description of that which allows everything to be. So there's no discrimination in those terms. But if you take the manifestation, there is the story of progress and there's the story of evolution.
Yes.
So it's that paradox that it's simultaneously totally present, but also it's totally dynamic in that it's evolving. So if you take life on Earth, for instance, you know, from the most rudimentary forms of life that appeared 16 billion years ago or whatever it was, you know, through the life that appeared, you know, in the seas and then on land, and then the animal forms, and then the most rudimentary human forms, to the more developed human forms, that there's this process that is taking place. And in terms of the focal point, there is development. So there is development of spiritual experience. So you may experience a level where there's complete confusion, there's complete loss of inner stability. But actually there can be development from that level through to a level of stability, to a level of knowing, and also to a level of expansion, so that the knowing is actually no longer dependent upon the mind, because what predominates in this age, in the way it's appearing at the moment, is the idea that it's the mind that knows everything, that decides everything, you know, committees are held and people describe things, and it's the functioning of the mind. But actually every creative person knows that what they do well and what they do effortlessly comes from a space that's beyond the mind.
That's right, yes.
And the most creative people in the world, whether they're politicians, whether they're actors, whether they're writers, whether they're philosophers, that knowing is actually coming directly from non-conceptual awareness, and the mind isn't intervening at all. So that level of development can also take place where the knowing and the trusting in that knowing becomes more profound.
Right.
So it's that simultaneous knowing of the total stability of present awareness and existence that never actually moves into manifestation, and the ever-changing appearance of everything that is happening. And that can develop. It's actually a phenomenal development.
Yes, yes.
And there is, in reality, there is no time, there is no development.
Yes.
But actually, because consciousness is the field of all possibilities, it can create that. It can make it appear as though all these things are happening. And, you know, there are all these different levels on which life can be experienced.
Yes.
And there can be a refinement, as you mentioned earlier, that there can be a raising of the vibrational level. So that consciousness is actually moving on to functioning on different levels. You know, this is a carbon-based level of experience. And, there can be levels, that are actually higher and lower than that, but actually it's all known by awareness.
Yeah.
And consciousness isn't actually moving. Consciousness is the basis on which all of that can be known.
So bringing those two together, the personal God with the unpersonal God, is like God walking on planet Earth, living this life of a human being, experiencing himself living through this body. Is this how you would see it? A man of the world, but not of the world?
Well, what I would say is
No,
that...
a man in the world, but not of the world. Yes.
Well, I would say that that is a man in the world, but not of the world.
Yes.
But I wouldn't say that is the level of divinity.
Yeah.
Because if you just take what is known of human experience, human experience appears to be limited. So what we can know in the mind of a human being is limited.
Yeah.
It's ever expanding, but it is limited. What can be experienced through the senses is limited. Generally, we only experience one thing at a time. But actually, if you look at the possibilities that are available, on the level of divinity, what you would call the level of the personal God would be where everything is known simultaneously.
Yes.
So
yes,
that consciousness could know every taste simultaneously, it could know every smell simultaneously, it could decide everything instantly.
Yes, yes.
And that would be the level. But actually, there's no comprehension of that. And also, that is a boundary to describe it in that way, because there are no limits within consciousness. So the possibilities, we can't even begin to conceive of what those possibilities are.
Yeah. Our minds are not developed enough.
They're just a little machine that we've used, to do a few little jobs with.
Yes.
But that's the game that it's playing, and it's also the total simplicity, because with self-realization is the knowing that it is already perfect. So there isn't any way that this moment could be improved on. Mm-hmm. So there isn't anywhere else that one would want to be or one would want to be doing.
Yeah.
But the paradox is that it can constantly improve, so that the depth of connection, not that there is connection, because the thing is with present awareness, that knows that everything is arising within itself. Mm-hmm. So there is no connection. Mm-hmm. But actually taking human qualities like compassion or love or knowing, there can be a deepening of that.
Yes.
But that, it isn't that when all of those things are fully known, all of those things are complete, there will be self-realization. Mm-hmm. Self-realization can actually know itself on the level of total ignorance. Mm-hmm. So it might be somewhat, self-realization is possible for someone who has had no education. And it can also be possible for a king, that there are no boundaries within it. It doesn't have to be somebody who's undergone years of spiritual practice. It can be somebody who's been, drinking and smoking all the time.
Mm-hmm. So the non-dual pointing is then talking to somebody who doesn't know anything about spiritual matters and pointing these things out to him.
It's pointing back
what reality really is.
Yes.
And activating their inner knowledge or self-remembering or
yes. It's allowing, just a very simple thing we could do.
Yeah.
In this moment, what is Renata aware of?
Well, I'm aware of the humming noise. I'm aware of you whipping in the chair. I'm aware of the television screen with one eye. I'm aware of the clock. I'm aware of the light, the plant.
Okay. Well,
I'm aware that I'm actually thirsty.
well, the thirst is actually a physiological need. that the body, currently known as Renata,
Yes.
requires water. So that's a physiological need.
So I'm aware now as the water,
Yes.
of the sensation of the water in my
Yes.
mouth.
There is an
Coming
awareness
down.
of the water going down the throat.
Yes.
Now, the common way of experiencing it is, I'm thirsty and I can taste that water and I
Yes.
can feel it going down my throat.
Yes.
But actually, the reality is that there is an awareness of the hand picking up the glass.
Yes.
There's an awareness of the water being tipped into the mouth, and there's an
Yes.
awareness of water going down the throat.
Yes.
But actually, it isn't a personal experience. That the awareness of that water, or the awareness of the sound of that gentle humming in the background, are being registered equally in awareness. So there is actually no subject-object experience. That consciousness has pretended that there is a subject called Renata who is tasting the water and who is hearing that.
Yes.
But actually what is ever present is the field of awareness that knows the taste of the water.
Yes.
It fully knows that. It fully knows the sound of the humming. It fully knows the lights, the background noises, the feeling of the weight of the body. And that awareness is who you are.
Yes.
And that awareness, it's being directly, all of those things are being directly registered in awareness.
Yeah.
And it doesn't require the mind to know that.
Yeah. There's just one thing, David, what in my own experience, I can be in this state of awareness and in the moment I feel a kind of a painful sensation in my body. It's almost like the whole body just sucks this huge expansion in to the system, and that's where it wants attention.
Yes.
And it completely collapses into the physical body.
Yes.
Yeah, and wants to sort out the pain or
Okay.
whatever is going on.
Well, it's ever-present awareness. It's present awareness that knows that.
Yes.
So whether there is the pain there or it's not there, it's awareness that knows the pain, and it knows not having pain also.
Yes.
What's happening in terms of that pain is that pain is actually an invitation, because that pain is saying there's a way in which experience is taking place that is giving rise to that. So for instance, if the concept is held that life is painful, there are a lot of people suffering, there's nothing I can do about that, and the world's terrible, then the emotion or the feeling that accompanies that thought is pain.
Yes.
But that pain is actually consciousness saying, hang on a minute, just wake up and see what's really happening. And what's really happening is that there is present awareness. There is the phenomena of pain, there is the phenomena of suffering, in the same way as if you're dreaming and something terrible happens in the dream.
But if somebody really experienced something very painful, either physically, they're sick, or emotionally, what do you say to them? You are not dead. I mean, that would be very cruel. Get out of that. You are dead. This person cannot do that in this moment.
No,
Maybe.
and
But is there a little help?
well,
a person is shaken of fear because they just got a diagnosis that they have cancer or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the way life is experienced generally is that there are these terrible things that happen, like pain, death, calamity, loss, all of those things. And in relative terms, they're terrible. If somebody says, you've got a terminal illness and you're going to die tomorrow, then, that can appear terrible, because if there's complete identification with the body and thinking, oh, that's who I am, you think, oh, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
But actually, there's a knowing of that. So when there is pain, there's a knowing of that pain. There's an awareness of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, each of those things is an invitation to see that it isn't you. So the things that people have a real aversion to, like death, change, loss, all of those things actually shake the sense of identification with the form of life as it appears. And when it's shaken to the point where consciousness detaches itself from the drama, that is self-realization. Mm-hmm. So actually they're not bad things. They're only perceived to be bad things when consciousness is disguising itself and making it appear as though you really are in pain. I, Renata, am in pain.
Yes.
But that idea is just an idea. That is part of the disguise. Consciousness is pretending that Renata is in pain, when actually awareness is aware of that pain, and what you truly are is the awareness that is aware of it, but that awareness hasn't in reality moved into the form of Renata.
Right. So.
But while the disguise is going on, while the identification is taking place, you could say on one level that there's nothing you could do about that.
No. You just have to wait till God touches you, or you're hit by grace.
Well, you could say that, but what is happening is the opportunity for that shift to take place is becoming, much more attainable for everyone. That it isn't something that just happens to a few people.
Yeah.
And actually, it just goes back to the very simple kind of checking in any moment. So if you check in this moment, what is there?
Yeah.
There is awareness. So there's awareness of the light, there's awareness of the sound, there's awareness of these bodies sitting on this seat.
Well, that's what Eckhart Tolle's message is. Yeah, bringing us all the time into the present moment.
Yes. But the only thing that I would differ with Eckhart on is that Eckhart is implying that presence is something that can be attained through practice.
Right.
But what Eckhart is talking about is the experience of presence. Because there can be an experience of presence. The experience of presence is stillness, the mind being quiet, imperturbability. Mm-hmm. That's the experience of presence. But true presence awareness, is the awareness that knows that. Mm-hmm. As it knows pain and as it knows calamity. It's awareness that fully knows all those things. And so awareness, there's no progressive development towards present awareness, because it's that in which everything arises.
Yes, yeah.
But
I think I really got it.
Fantastic. But the experience of presence, which is what Eckhart is talking about, is actually very valuable. Yeah. The ability to disidentify with pain is actually a very useful tool. It's something that makes the human experience much nicer.
Yeah.
But actually, that isn't moving you towards self-realization, because one is already the ever-present awareness in which all that arises. Mm-hmm. But it uses the disguise of things like the experience of presence to make it seem as though, oh yeah, there was that experience of presence. If only I can make that permanent and lasting, then I'm going to be self-realized. But actually the realization is that the knowing of that experience of presence, or the knowing of the sensation of pain, or the knowing of a thought crossing the mind, or a cloud passing the sky, are all known equally in the awareness that you already are.
Yes. I think, David, that's a good moment to stop our interview. We ran out of time, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
It was very interesting, and I think I got something
Good.
really out for myself. And thank you for watching Conscious TV. Goodbye.